fiction, science fiction, horror, fantasy, crime, LGBT, thriller.
You have now entered the House of Mystery.
Welcome back into the House of Mystery. I'm Al Warren. From the UK, we've got Mr. Gavin Stone.
Hello.
Listen, Gavin, I know you're in the UK, but I know you have something to do with all that whiskey that was stolen from Sammy Hagar, hey?
Yeah, what can I say? I've been on the wagon for 3 years now, and I just wanted a backup stash, just in case.
$1 million worth of whiskey stolen from his shipping truck.
Well, I couldn't get any more.
So is that your new business for 25? You're going to be selling that sort of thing?
Yeah, why not? We'll go with the drunken spy. We'll see if we can see if that works as a business.
Well, yeah, it makes me wonder why they were shipping such high end whiskey and have no security.
Yeah,
it's strange to me, but that's the kind of things I think. I kind of think, well, why wouldn't you when it's such a high, expensive dollar item, and how would anybody know that wasn't part of it? You know. So
that's it, yeah. It almost makes you want to start coughing the word insurance, doesn't it?
Yeah. So the first thing I think of when there's something like this going on is you. But so what we've got another guy here who writes, and he's in your kind of world, and his new book, Sell Like a Spy. That's the art of persuasion from the world of espionage. There we go. So a friend of yours, Jeremy Hurewitz, thank you for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you both for having me.
Listen, so do you find yourself, because you were in the business for a long time, like you're part of all that world, former CIA and FBI and counterterrorism and all that stuff, when events like this happen like that, I mean, it's just commercial and it's just Sammy Hagar and stuff. It's not like the world ending stuff. Do you ever follow these sort of things that happen, kind of wonder or put together crimes?
Yeah, a bit, because it sometimes, winds up touching the world that I currently occupy, which is corporate security and kind of corporate espionage. So sometimes we're retained by organizations to augment the efforts of law enforcement to figure things out. I was working on a murder case some time ago on behalf of the defense, for instance. So sometimes I take an interest in it. I also kind of follow China matters quite a bit. So if there's a certain crime aspect, say a hack that involves China, I tend to track it. But I enjoy whiskey, and I didn't know about this story, so I'm going to have to track this one just out of interest.
Yeah, I was just surprised because it was it's kind of a high quality. I guess him and Guy Fiero have a lot of tequila together, and they've done this aged whiskey that, it's really expensive, and their cost, they say, is over $1 million. So it just seemed weird, and the whole thing got heisted, and I thought, wow, that's quite the deal. But is hacking kind of the thing we should be looking for most nowadays? Is that the thing most common people should just sort of be aware of nowadays?
Well, I'm not a hacking expert, and nor am I kind of, a crime expert, but, all the work I do with Interfor International, we certainly see a lot of issues that are related to that, where, the AI is getting more sophisticated, being able to impersonate voices of, say, like an elderly grandmother to call up and, try to swindle somebody. So, and I'm just like everybody else, trying to figure out how to keep up with it all and keep a password sense that I can remember, or, should I note it down? Should I change things? It's bewildering to try to figure it out. And ultimately, I kind of shrug my shoulders at the end of the day and say, if they really are determined to get after you, unless you're, such an elite person with amazing skills, they probably will. So, be careful.
Well, listen, so Sell Like a Spy, what is this? Like, what kind of book is it? Why did you write it? And what were you hoping to get across to people?
Yeah, well, a couple things. The book itself is, despite its title, it's not only about spies. The book is a synthesis of lessons from the world of elite government agencies. So, of course, CIA, but also, law enforcement agencies like the FBI, the Department of Justice, Secret Service, the military, General Stanley McChrystal is in there, as well as military interrogators, members of the special forces. And I have worked with all of these individuals in the world of corporate security, and I have attempted to synthesize some of the lessons that I have picked up and utilized in my own personal and professional life to create a handbook of sorts for people to be able to develop relationships, overcome challenges in developing relationships, in particular with people they might not initially like. How to detect deception and read body language, how to overcome emotional, challenging encounters. Those are the types of things that are in the book, as well as, lessons on negotiation and kind of closing a big deal. But it's also a bit of a memoir of, if I can say with a sense of, humility still, that I've had a, somewhat unique career. I was overseas for a decade. In some pretty interesting locations. And, the world of corporate security, I describe it as the biggest industry that no one's heard of, because it's a multi-billion-dollar industry and it quietly influences foreign policy in the business world, but behind the scenes because of the clandestine nature of it. So I enjoy kind of, spreading the word about the work that goes on there. And in terms of how I got started writing it, it's very interesting because when I came back from my time overseas and started working for a British security organization, a big one, I started working with an individual very closely who was in the CIA, and he was a NOC, so non-official cover. And he really kind of, I learned a lot from him about both, the intelligence world, and then watching him operate and how good he was at reading people, building rapport with such a wide range of people who I knew he didn't necessarily like. And the reason I'm saying that is I had sort of fallen out of touch with him, and I bumped into him on the streets of Midtown Manhattan, and we're meeting up for a beer at the end of the day today. So I intend to tell him a little bit more about that. But
with the content of the book, then, I mean, is this something that you had in mind, like a target audience that would benefit from this, or is this something that, like, kind of pretty much anybody who reads the book would come out of this the other end with a kind of a better way of dealing with things in life? Is this for everybody or somebody specific?
Yeah, great question, Gavin, and I'm pleased that you're asking it, because the title "Sell Like a Spy" I think is good and bad. I think it's kind of catchy, and you can sort of very quickly get what the book is about, and it is correct in that sense. But I don't want to be kind of ghettoized into like just the sales book or even just the business book section. I believe, to answer your question, that this is broadly applicable to everyday life, and I describe that all the time. Everyday life is a huge part of it. I've been on kind of dating podcasts, and I aspire to do more of that. I'm sort of on a mission to make men shut up a little bit and become a little better at dating and some of those things. So these skills are absolutely applicable beyond the business world and good for just about any sort of communications, relationship development experience.
Gavin, you need this book. Well, it's interesting, working with CIA and FBI and all that. What do you think people get wrong about that? What do you think people in general think about CIA and FBI and all that sort of the agencies, the spy agencies and stuff and they get it wrong?
Yeah, it's funny that you asked that, because I do a lot of like keynote speaking at conferences and all that, and pretty much the very first thing I talk about are misconceptions, because in order to learn from spies, I think we have to humanize them. And, Hollywood doesn't give us, with some notable exceptions, content that is realistic about this world, okay? You have James Bond driving an Aston Martin, engaged in seduction and car chases. You have Jason Bourne with almost kind of superhuman abilities. I describe spies as elite relationship managers. They're really good at growing relationships with people. There's paramilitary sides to the agency. Sometimes case officers find themselves in some very sticky situations. But the spy I'm meeting up with tonight said to me, back in the early days, I was thinking about this, that if you're involved in a situation like that, something's gone badly wrong. It's mostly relationship development. So, I try to dispel the misconceptions about spies so that we can learn from them, and also so that we can appreciate these individuals and not put them on a weird pedestal that Hollywood creates for them. One of the things that I've really enjoyed doing is shining a light on their public service, which I admire, in a huge way. And when we see members of the U.S. military, or at least I do, I know you guys aren't Americans, but maybe, it's similar for you. When you see members of the armed services, you maybe thank them for their service, but spies aren't wearing a uniform. So if I can shine a light on these individuals and the sacrifices they've made for their countries and the dangers they've experienced and the hardships they've been through to keep our country safe, I'd like to do that. I admire their skills and their public service.
What's some of the most unique techniques that you think that we can pick up as just normal people and not trained spies to use in our everyday life?
Yeah, well, I think the one that comes to mind most quickly that people really get excited to learn about is elicitation. And elicitation is a more circumspect way to collect information. And it's something I've had to work hard at. I don't always succeed because I am like a textbook, candid, straightforward New Yorker. So like I have something on my mind, I'm going to ask you about it or talk to you about it. But living in China, that was a challenge. I was there as a journalist, and they are not exactly candid and straightforward in their culture. So that was maybe that first lesson in a little bit more of a roundabout way to collect information. But spies are trained in a way to collect information in that kind of way. And the idea is that whether you're a spy, a salesperson, or a journalist, if you meet somebody of interest, if you start peppering that person with a ton of questions, and sometimes some really on-the-nose questions, it's going to elicit the response you don't want, which is cynicism, defensive-ness, suspicion. But if you can use elements of behavioral science to elicit the information that you need, you can proceed in a way to either recruit that person as an agent or, figure out what might motivate them to become your client or your friend. And I'm talking about using things like the tendency to correct is the one I go to first almost all the time. So if I say, hey, Gavin, isn't your favorite color blue? Gavin's going to turn around and say, he might say yes, because I guessed it. Or more likely, he's going to say, no, my favorite color isn't blue, it's green. Because there is a strong tendency to correct in all human beings. We're all vain. We will all correct the record about anything about ourselves almost every time. So you can depend on that as a way to elicit information. If you're savvy, especially if you have a premeditated attempt at a piece of information you want to elicit, using some of the triggers that are in behavioral science that I write about in my book can offer you a really interesting way to collect information.
I'm going to say Gavin's, he's really good at soliciting anyway.
Yeah. I love, I used to teach the elicitation techniques, and it was something that I used to enjoy. It was one of my favorite kind of lessons to deliver. And I used to start, by saying to people, look, questions are dead. And teach the kind of 15 different elicitation techniques. So I know you used to do investigative journalism. What are the kind of overlaps? So if anybody's like in the world of journalism now, investigative journalism, would there be a huge value for that kind of person with the lessons in your book? I'm asking a question I already know the answer to, but I'd like to hear because you've lived in the world of investigative journalism, what would the application be of these techniques?
Well, yeah, I think per your question, I think everybody can benefit from, some of the details in the book, I like to think. I think about it in the flip way because, on the flip side, perhaps, because I think that some of the skills I picked up in journalism have helped me to develop this. But I do think, that some of these skills can make you a better journalist. So, active listening is a very challenging thing. And I spend a lot of time in the book talking about, again, behavioral science, evolution, why we have evolved to be such poor listeners, and give some techniques to people about how to become better listeners. And that can certainly help any journalist, right? Elements of rapport building. I talk about mirroring, which is widely discussed, especially in the business world, but I bring in verbal mirroring, which is a tool that FBI hostage negotiators use. Just as an aside, I spent a number of years working in corporate kidnap for ransom as part of my work in corporate security. So I've worked with a lot of former hostage negotiators, and they're adept at verbal mirroring, and layering that on top of physical mirroring. If you're a journalist sitting across from perhaps a nervous source, if you're adept at both of these forms of mirroring, it could put that person at ease. Again, leveraging, evolution and behavioral science. And then, of course, getting back to what we were just talking about, elicitation. How do you get someone to share information in a more subtle manner, versus kind of scaring them off? So I do think if you're a journalist, you could benefit from the skills in the book for sure.
Brilliant. And can you give us an example of a time that you used this, maybe even surprised yourself by using it in your own life?
Yeah.
You don't have to be too specific.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I give kind of a business example. At one of my roles in corporate consulting, we had some big retainers with clients, and 6-7 figure retainers that were renewed annually that we'd put a lot of time into. And oftentimes these were privately held companies, and information on how they were faring economically was hard to come by. And with a big client roster, it's hard to always keep up on that, even if you're really devoted. So there were moments where I faced an information gap, and I always talk about information gaps in corporate intelligence and in the intelligence world generally speaking. You can't always find that piece of intel. I'm sure you would agree, Gavin, but what you can do is narrow the information gap to help decision makers make those decisions. So in this case, if I had a client that I didn't know how well they were doing economically, I knew that year over year they were using our services about flat, so about the same as the previous year. But I was looking for more intel, so I called up the client, and I used what was known as professional pride, as well as the tendency to correct, to elicit information. I said, hey, look, Jennifer, I'm hearing rumors the company's struggling, bad quarters, layoffs, budget cuts. I was worried about it, so I thought I'd call you to check in. And she corrected the record and said, she could have just said, no, we're doing fine, thank you. But instead she engaged in a little bit of bragging and said, no, we're growing, we're doing well, the team is expanding, because people are prideful about their work. And so I used both the tendency to correct and professional pride to learn that, hey, the company was actually doing well. So I don't know how they're feeling about our research services here, but they're doing well. And that narrowed the gap for me and helped me out.
Being in this business, and even, the corporate ransom that goes on and security and all that stuff like that. Do you find it hard to get out of that lifestyle? Like in your everyday life, do you look at people with security in mind? Like, you know what I mean? Like you're looking at, it's like a cop that's always arresting people and looking at the bad and the negative and dealing with the hardships. Can you get your mind out of that and look at people differently?
I don't try to. I think I embrace it as a mindset. Being security minded, means, I watch when a van is rolling down the street. Is it riding low? I'll notice that, and that would make me suspicious. What are they carrying in there? So that's not paranoia. That's just a little bit of training. But in terms of the socialization aspect of it, I think it's a really big benefit. And I use my time at networking events and other things to push myself to invest in my active listening practice, which is how I describe it. It's a challenge to really stand in a very busy room and be fully engaged with somebody and, make that person feel like they're the only person that matters to you at that moment. So I'm constantly pushing myself to do that. I like to try to elicit information. I like to try to mirror behavior. So I know that these things can help both my career and what I'm doing and my ability to develop relationships with people. I wouldn't say I'm a hothead, but, I have a temper, like anybody, I suppose. And I try to think about what I write about in the book, some of the ways to diffuse difficult encounters and how emotion trumps cognition and how I can be better in those ways. So for me, it's not about turning it off. I don't feel persecuted by it. It's quite the contrary.
And recently, there can be a lot of negativity about spies and CIA agents and stuff like that, and in the press and all around, not just them. How do you counter that?
I think by, doing what I talked about before, humanizing spies, take them out of the world of Hollywood, show them to be dedicated public servants who aren't superhuman individuals, but have been invested with, incredible training and skills, and talking about, safely, because you don't want to expose national security secrets, ways that they have helped support the safety of this society and its, foreign policy. So that's what I try to shine a light on. And I'm, always, there's going to be bad apples in any field, and the CIA has black marks on its record like any intelligence agencies. And I think you have to own that and you have to talk about it. But I have a section in my book on ethics and how the CIA created an ethical framework, which I honestly am fascinated by that. And I think there are huge lessons for corporate leaders in creating ethics. And I talk about how I've benefited in my career from an ethical structure in the corporate world. So, I like to shine a light on the ways of that these intelligence agencies and others have enriched lives and helped people while being accountable, and shining a light on bad actors.
Now you've had to go at writing the non-fiction. Do you think you would ever turn yourself in and give a try to writing a fiction novel at any point?
Oh, yeah. Well, Gavin, there's been a few attempts already. At an earlier point in my life, I've written a couple novels, but now I have two pretty much in the can. I have a spy novel about the corporate security world that my excellent agent, Michael Signorelli at Aevitis Creative Management, who is open for business for all you publishers who might have your interest piqued. It's a very interesting take on corporate security involving China. So we're shopping that. And I do have a literary novel that I just finished. I spent 7 years living in Prague, starting in the late 90s, and I just made a research trip back. I think I told you about that, Gavin. And who knows? You take a stab at some of these things. I feel a little bit like anxious about will it work, will it not work? But I enjoy it so much, and the roundabout answer is yes, Gavin. I very much hope to write novels and more nonfiction.
Why don't we hear more about the corporate spy world and security?
I think because it's been waiting for me to describe it, Alan. Well, I think the nature of the professionals in it they're naturally rather secretive. I think that it's an industry that values discretion. So people have sort of tried to stay out of the limelight. I don't believe I'm betraying any secrets at all, and I value the professionalism of the individuals and my own and my clients because I still work. I work as an advisor to a really interesting boutique firm called Interfor International. But I think it's time that the world learned a little bit more about it, and I think I'm trying to be out there talking about this world a little bit because I love spy novels, and there's some great authors that are newish out there. I'm sure you guys are reading them, but I think that there's tons of compelling storylines about this world of corporate security, the world of hedge funds, private equity, banks, Fortune 500 companies operating in, really colorful emerging markets in need of security, in need of intelligence. And I'm excited to write about it and hope there's a bright future in it.
Who's your favorite spy author at the moment? Myself excluded, of course.
Of course. Well,
at the moment, or like all time, or
let's go with both. Let's go with at the moment and all time.
Yeah, well, I've been reading Charles Cummings. I've been enjoying him. I like the David McCloskey books.
I was talking to David earlier today, David McCloskey, yeah.
Yeah. I'd like to meet him at some point. I think we've crossed over. We have mutual friends, but I admire his work. In terms of all times, Norman Mailer is not considered a spy novelist, but I love the book Harlot's Ghost. I just think it was so terrific about the spy world. And then the Robert Littell book, The Company, is kind of my all-time favorite. I like huge novels, like real tomes that you can dig into, and that's a doorstop for sure.
Yeah. Oh, brilliant! And I'm gonna ask about, because you're a musician and you also have over a dozen albums out as well. Is that right?
That is, yes.
Wow, that one kind of slips under the radar most of the time, then I take it.
I don't talk about it as much in this world. I write a little bit about music in the book, and I do mention that I'm a musician because I have this belief that, in this section called Use Your Superpowers, that the people should have multidisciplinary lives, and they should, or I just would encourage them to. I don't know if they should. People, would do well to have passions in their lives, and I have, examples in the book about how it opens doors for you that you might not have seen in your life. And there's a section that's fun called The Spy Who Skied, about how a big recruit happened because one of the case officers was a incredible skier. So, I don't know that music opens all those doors for me, but it's, it's something I have dozens of albums out, or over a dozen rather, tours, some radio play, and it's something I care deeply about.
Wait, is it rap music or what?
It's death metal, Alan. That's what. No, I'm just kidding. It's a little hard to describe because it's eclectic. I mostly play guitar. There's occasionally some vocals, occasionally some electronics, but I'm primarily a guitar player. And I think I'm not very well known, but I think the little known I am is for solo acoustic guitar.
Wow, I've just won a bet with myself because I said either bass player or guitar, and I couldn't make my mind up. I was going towards guitar, so yes, I was.
Everybody's a guitarist. Yeah.
So, last question from me: how does this book that you've just done, how does this differ from other similar books in the genre? In your opinion, what's better about this one?
Yeah, the book that comes up the most is Never Split the Difference. The classic book. What's his name?
Chris Voss, I think it was.
Yes, of course, Chris Voss. And Chris worked either for Gary Nessner or Steve Romano, my two former chief hostage negotiator buddies. And it's a terrific book. Make no mistake. And I'm not trying to say mine is better, but I think mine has a more, again, use that word, multidisciplinary approach to to these sort of things, and I think the remit of skills in the book is a little bit wider. So I'm quite proud of that. And look, if we're 1/4 as successful with my book as Chris has been with his, I'd be delighted, because he's made an enormous impact culturally and in the business world. So yeah.
I was just going to say, what has this book done for you? What at the end of it, has it changed you in any way?
Changed me. Well, I would say it's helped to liberate me. I think I was one of these guys during COVID that said, you know what, I don't ever want to go back to working in an office again. I think that's created problems, and it's kind of a driver for my business. Younger people have let's say a lack of emotional intelligence, because they're not getting the mentoring opportunities. They're not going to offices and having impromptu lunches and happy hours, and they were educated during COVID virtually. And so there's lots of problems there with that. But for me, it opened the door to write this book and to say, you know what, I don't want to go back to an office. I want to work for myself. I started my own business. I do work part-time for a company, but it liberated me in some ways, and it continues to do so. And once you have a book that's put out by a good publisher, and you have a decent agent, you can write a novel and think, hey, maybe this will get read. You know what I mean? And you can pitch an editor at a publication, and if you're an author, it opens doors for you. So, and it's just been an enormous lifelong goal of mine to hold a hardcover book of mine in my hands and share it with my parents and all of that, who were mentioned in the book and had a deep influence on it. So it's been a big life accomplishment, and I'm really proud of it, and I hope it's kind of the first of many.
I did previously say last question, so I apologize, but I meant to ask if it's available on audiobook as well for people.
It is, and I narrated it, so you'll have to put up with my voice to do it. But I had a lot of fun, and they told me I did well. I think there were 3 days allocated, and I did it in 2, and it was quite fun. So I enjoyed it.
Wonderful.
Well, that's great. Yeah, if the writer can do it, it usually comes out better.
I think so. The delivery of it, the passion for the certain facts, and all that. So I'm really glad I was able to do it.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about. Do you have social media? Do you have a website? Do you have all that thing set up for people to kind of get in contact?
I do. I don't do TikTok because I think it should be banned, and I've written about that. I write pretty regularly for The Hill, and I've written a column on that. But yes, my website is selllikeaspy.net. I'm fairly active on LinkedIn, so you could find me there. I'm also on Twitter at @selllikeaspy, and would encourage folks to connect with me on any of those areas.
Well, fantastic. Now we'll have all that up, as well as your book, Sell Like a Spy, and we appreciate you for being here. This has been great. Learned a lot. So, Jeremy Hurewitz, thank you.
Thank you both so much for having me. I enjoyed this conversation.
This has been a production of the House of Mystery Radio Show. To find out more about our show, guests, or hosts, go to our website at houseofmysteryradio.com.